Fix your Genesis box. Oh. Now, I spend a lot of time on Twitter seeing what people are talking about and suggesting. I get a lot of suggestions about things to look at, things to take apart, and games and everything. So when I came across this from someone on Twitter, I pretty much knew I had to look at it because it's probably the weirdest controller idea I've seen. And it kind of plays on the idea that Microsoft has even with the Elite controller, where you have things on the controller that can be switched out. This attempts to switch out like half the controller and the button configurations. The issue I've run into, though, is it doesn't really work that well. So I put it back in the box so we can take a look at an unboxing and everything for you guys so you kind of know what you're getting into. But you're probably already spotting these 4 items here. And yeah, let's just open it up and I can show you what I'm talking about. I have my Switch here too, and we can kind of go over it. So here we are with the Switch pad. It ran about $55. That was on sale. Usually it's like over $60. I see it on Amazon, which is insane, by the way, for this product. And you can see a 5-in-1 controller. It is wireless, has a rechargeable battery inside, and it is specifically, as you can imagine, called Switch Pad, targeted towards Switch game console. So let's open it up here, get this guy out, and nothing else in the box. There was actually stuff underneath of the plastic as well as obviously everything here. So let me just actually get that stuff out of the way real quick. These are actually covers for the controller, so that it changes colors in accordance with these to kind of complete the theme a bit. Just the right side though changes out. A very long, I want to just point this out, a very long USB Type-C cable. It actually does charge through USB Type-C, which kind of threw me off a bit because it's not a very quality feeling controller, but it does use USB-C, and it's actually a really nice cable. It's a very thick cable that seems pretty durable, so that's good. And then some instructions, just in case you want to go through that in several different languages. And then we have our controller, along with several different button configurations here, which we'll be talking about and going over. Now, when I first took the controller out, I was shocked at how poor some of it feels. Now, the bottom here is like this rubberized feeling, and I even noticed that on the bottom it's already coming apart on me, so that's fun. But the sticks don't feel bad, really. They actually feel all right. The issue I have with the sticks is that they are very thin, like on the actual stick, so the travel is longer than like a Pro controller or a PS4 controller or an Xbox controller. The D-pad it's really funny. We just did the Dreamcast video yesterday when we got it from GameStop. This D-pad reminds me a bit of that Dreamcast one where it feels very mushy, which obviously isn't great. The A, B, X, and Y in its stock format actually feel okay. There's good travel to them. They have a nice click, and I actually don't mind these buttons at all. They are fine. You also have, of course, right stick. Then you have plus, minus, home button, capture button. And then on the top, you have a tactile, click, L and R. But ZR and ZL feel really bad. They're very mushy, and they don't jump back like I'd like them to. They don't feel great. I would have rather them been tactile as well if this is what they were going to do otherwise. And it feels like you know that feeling like if you get like something like gunk or like food or just junk, something sticky in like your buttons or your trigger. That's what it feels like. It feels like they spilled something into this before they shipped it out. So we have all of these quadrants here, right? And the different quadrants actually switch out, which is kind of interesting. So let me take all of these out because I will test all of them, and we'll actually have the switch on, it connected, and then you guys can see what the button configurations are, because to be honest, some of these just don't work. They just don't work at all. It's really funny. Like I don't know what the point of this one is, because I actually went through the button configuration, and these are not the buttons they're supposed to be, so they don't even work. But I'll actually show you what the buttons are and everything. So you might be wondering how you switch this out. You also have your USB-C, by the way, there, and then a sync button and reset button on the back. You might be wondering how you switch these out. Well, the plastic right here is actually set up with a notch down here to pop off. So you actually clip that off, and it comes up. Now, this is actually just sitting in there, and it's held down with pressure. So this just pops right out, and you're good. It's weird because it does use like all these points here for it to connect to tell it what you're pressing. And it's a cool idea, I'll admit that. It's pretty neat to have that and just be able to pop these off. So let's say I want to grab the Super Famicom themed controller buttons. You actually just drop that in. You can even grab your little, the plastic, I guess. I guess it'd be this one here. And you can actually match it up so that the colors and everything on the right side Everything makes sense. And when you push it down, you have to really make sure you push it down because it does need to be clipped in and have some serious pressure on it for it to work, because it is all like pressure mounted, and pressure is technically holding it down and keeping everything connected. It doesn't actually screw in or anything, which is, again, an interesting idea. A, B, X, Y, again, just like the Super Famicom or even Super Nintendo controller, and then you're off. The weird thing about this, though, is the plastic has this ridge around it, so you can see like A is very close to that ridge right there, and you feel it when you press, and it's a real shame. It does not feel great, and this is like the best case scenario. Let me show you some of the worst case scenarios. So this is our Nintendo 64 controller setup here, which is weird because the buttons aren't even correctly colored. I was almost positive that B was green. I'll have to maybe double check, but I'm almost positive just from memory that's what it was. Anyway, you drop this on and you fight with the plastic a little bit to clip it in. Make sure it's clipped down everywhere. And now I have, in theory, a Nintendo 64 setup with C buttons, by the way, which is also odd because I tested the button inputs for that too, and it's not at all correct or set up for anything at all. And again, though, this is weird because these C buttons are so small and the ridge actually makes it very difficult to hit just one of these. You have to really be looking to press it. But that is a setup it looks like for the N64. Let me bring the Switch in here and I'll actually show you what some of these buttons actually are. Okay, so I've synced it up and everything to the Switch. It's sitting right here. And of course, we can actually go into the test input devices in the controller settings and we can see what all of these buttons actually are. So we have A, which makes sense. We have B, also makes sense. Now we start getting into the C buttons, and at that point, you can just take a guess. Go ahead, take guesses what you think these are going to be. Here's C right, that is ZR. Here's, C, I didn't realize that until just now. That's actually pointing up. It's supposed to be down, but it's C up in the down position. It's quality right there. Down is X, that is Y. So I guess this is essentially the setup here that it would be normally for, like, for example, this, right? But they've kind of played around and moved some of the buttons around. Otherwise, though, these are your 4 face buttons, just in different orders, it looks like. And then up is ZL. So you have ZR, ZL, you have Y, X, A, and then B. Again, they just kind of moved some of them around there. And it's an odd setup. It really is. I'm not really sure what you would play with this. Even if they had Nintendo 64 coming to this, I don't think they would let you remap buttons or anything. Let me, let's change it out. What I noticed is you can also just kind of, you can actually hot swap it while it's on. I don't know if they even tell you to turn it off or not, but I was just playing around with it. I said, okay, let me just go ahead and swap these guys out. Let's get in our NES setup, right? This is what some people might actually want to get it for, and to be honest, it would actually be a pretty cool setup here because there's only 2 buttons, so the ridge doesn't really affect it that much on the edge. So when I saw that, I said, okay, this would be something that people might be interested in for this setup because it is indented down, so the buttons actually have that NES feel. Again, it's not too close to the edge, so you can press it. Here's the issue. If I press B, it is actually ZL. If I press A, it is X. Why? Why is that the case? Again, ZL, X. That means you can't do anything with this controller at all. Like, you can't play any of the NES games that this would be perfect for. You have no A button at that point, so you can't even navigate the menu. I don't know why that's the case here. Maybe they messed up their inputs or something. I haven't seen any type of update for this controller online. This right here is pretty much just a useless setup for the NES controllers. The Super Famicom isn't even really worth talking about because it's pretty much the same setup as this one. I just noticed that the buttons don't travel as far. They're a little shorter, a little closer to the edge, and they're not indented at all. So, like, the Super Nintendo has obviously some buttons that are indented, but this is the Super Famicom one. It doesn't have as long of a travel. That's the only difference I can see between these, and of course, it looks cooler than just the plain X, Y, A, B. I think anyway. I like the Famicom kind of colors set up there. So let's actually go over to the GameCube one instead, and I am changing them out with the colors that that are supposed to be set up for it. You don't have to, obviously, but I figure we'll get the full experience here as we go. So this is the purple setup. There we go. And now we have our GameCube setup here, right? This is our full GameCube controller, and it looks cool at first. I said, all right, this is actually something to be neat. So let's see what X is. X is X, Y is Y, A, and B. Okay, so this is actually a nice little setup for a GameCube controller. Again, the only issue I have is this ridge. And I think they need this ridge to help put pressure and hold it down. But like X is actually kind of hard to hit. without pressing something like A, since you can't really get at it from this side. You seriously have to like just press it down. So I don't recommend this for Smash even a little bit, like not at all. And then the other issue is sometimes I've noticed this as well, the pressure isn't quite right on those edges. So sometimes you won't even have X actually register at times, especially if you're playing like a serious game of Smash or something. So a weird setup nonetheless. That ridge really hurts it for a lot of things, but these buttons are at least all in the correct spots and they actually work. Now it doesn't turn the Switch on from sleep, which I've seen some of the PowerA controllers now do. This one, however, does not, which is a shame. I like the idea of being able to turn the Switch on, obviously, with your controller, so you don't have to walk over and turn it on when you enter the room, or maybe you sit down on the couch and you grab your controller. Otherwise, you have to use another controller, turn it on, and then use this one. So that's kind of a bummer there. But it does have rumble, not HD rumble. It's a very violent shake. It's all over the place at times. Some people have actually complained, even in reviews on Amazon, that it hurts their hands for a long time. But it does have motion controls. So you're actually seeing here, I have Splatoon fired up, and yes, motion controls do work in the game with this controller. It does seem like a lot of third-party games have pretty much figured out gyro controls and everything on the Switch, so that's at least good. I mean, we see a lot of third-party controllers that work with basically every game when it comes to motion controls with Doom or a first-party game like Splatoon, so that's at least good there. Well, I guess at this point, we'll go ahead and take it apart and just take a look inside. Battery size is something I'm interested in, as they didn't even really quote how long the battery lasts. It hasn't died on me yet. I charged it up fully and used it for a couple hours or so, and it seemed fine from there. But I am curious to see a number of things inside. I'm also curious as to this setup here, because it's something I've really never seen on a controller. I think that's a cool idea to have a hot swap space. It's kind of weird that, like, I would be interested to see a fully modular controller. I think that'd be kind of cool to kind of see how they'd make that work. But let's go ahead and pull this back off and see what we have. So I removed the screws on the back, but then it really wasn't moving, so I decided to try to actually start ripping the rubberized part off, and it's actually clipped in, and then there are screws underneath of it after you unclip it. So they've actually hidden the screws fairly well underneath. So I have to, I guess, rip this one off as well, and then unscrew the screws here, and then hopefully it'll start to actually pull apart. Yeah, so it looks like that'll do it. As soon as I get the screws over here off, I should be able to then pull it apart. Like, that's actually one of the reasons I figured this was starting to pull apart, is because the clips were kind of loose on it. And it's really not too bad to get apart with like a spudger, but there are definitely some fairly strong clips in there as well. And it's just more of a pain than just to be able to unscrew a few things and take it apart, like we did with like those PowerA controllers, for example. So once I get this off, we should have it open. All right, so after I just made a mess everywhere from like the rubberized parts start like shavings coming off after ripping it off, we do have at least the back coming up. It is plugged in. Okay, our battery's back there. That's fine. I can actually remove this guy too. These are the shoulder button parts, covers. And that we can actually move this over. And the reason there's a cable going is that's our battery right there, which is pretty much like sunk into the back. Hold on, let me get this guy up. And oh man, look at that. That is such a weird setup for that controller. Look at where the springs are right there. That's probably why it feels so, maybe that's why it feels so weird, because it's like the end of the spring. And look, like when you push down the spring, this doesn't have any good kickback to it. And that's probably why it feels so weird. It actually almost like starts bending the spring at like a right angle. I think that's why it feels so lazy when it like springs back, because there's not a ton of tension on it right there. That's just such a weird setup for the trigger on the back. I have no idea why they did that. That's too bad. That's a shame. Let me see if I can rip this battery out as well. Here's also our our rumble motors. Very basic, very standard. And that's like an older design that we've pretty much had forever. That's why it feels so violent, is because it's not like the HD Rumble, for example, that Nintendo uses. This is a much more inaccurate and just all over the place type of rumble. The one thing that's interesting about these triggers is they appear to be analog triggers. Kind of the setup here where it pushes down and then it actually moves, almost to kind of just give it just a one long input, essentially, that it can pretty much judge and figure out how far you're pushing down. But the Switch has nothing that really needs analog triggers, and this is marketed directly to the Switch. So I don't really know what the point of this was. This could have just been a tactile button. They have tactile buttons here, right here, for L and R. Like, I don't know why they did this entire mechanism with this very weak spring to try to figure all this out, to try to have it like that same kind of feel. It's not even close, by the way, to like the Xbox One controller, for example, or I guess the PS4 controller. I don't know why they did all this. It seems like a waste. Battery came right out. I was trying to get a look at how large the battery was, and it started to rub off, but it appears to be 400 milliamp hour is the battery. That is a pretty small battery. It's not huge. It's I don't imagine that the battery life on this is more than, I would say, 5 hours, maybe 6 at the most. It is a tiny battery, and that's actually lodged right in the back right here. All right, so the board wasn't really held in at all. I think one of the plastics was too big for it on where it goes through, and I think that's what was holding it in. But after a little bit of pressure, it seemed to pop off. And here we are with that. Wow, look at that. You know what's really funny about this? Oh man, let me show you this. It's almost like they repurposed another board because it still has the inputs where you press down for like any of these A, B, X, and Y. Like you see them right there. They're the same inputs that they're using for things like start, select, the D-pad. It's very odd. I guess maybe they just had a board and they were like, oh, let's put these pins in and then we'll connect them to those. Let me see, because these kind of line up like that. You see these gold pins here, and then we have the pins there, the spots to put it down. So you press down, and that's how you get that connection with the pressure. But they have those pads there. This could have just been a regular controller, and to be honest, it might as well have been. Like, there's really no reason to play with this or this, considering nothing's set up for it. And that ridge around the edge gives you pretty much a disadvantage in Smash. I don't really know what the point of this controller was. But there you go. They decided to repurpose one and just have these pins in. So the pins appear to be actually soldered to these pads, or they have traces that run to these pads, and that's how they get those connections. Although they do have like these where they have multiples, but that might actually be from connecting from these in different combinations, might actually be giving them those, because you can see they run down around there on the edge, and then they come down around here. So they definitely have these pads set up, and they definitely have traces running from these pins to these pads. And so that's probably how they're getting some of their inputs. But what a weird setup. And that's going to do it here for the Switch pad. It's a weird idea. I don't really know what advantage it actually gives you in any game, or why you would buy it for these setups, because nothing uses them, and some, like the NES one, for example, are completely inoperable. They just don't work. So I don't really know why you'd buy this. I think it's up to like $60 now on Amazon, maybe even a little more. You might buy a Pro controller for this one. This is not a good controller to buy. Cool idea, and honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing a modular controller similar to this, but you know, good. But let me know what you guys think about this down below. Make sure you like the video if you liked it, dislike it if not. Get subscribed, guys. We got a bunch more stuff coming up, and it's gonna be pretty fun. And I'll see you guys next time.